Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Pajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Pajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Bhad Paramahansa, Parudikacharya, Ashtotar to Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parudikacharya, Ashtotar to Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Jamal Prabhu. Can we shut that till about, so leave about 6 inches open and close the curtains? Thank you. Okay. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriyet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 12th day of June, 2019, in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, Chapter 13, description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, text number 21. Vidura Uvacha Tastashilanade Sadho Brahmanyasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao vidura vacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao vidura vacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao vidura vacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao vidura uvacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao vidura vacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao. Damodar Kumar. Vidura uvacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanasya mahatmanaha brahmanyasya ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao. Anyone else? Vidura uvacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanyasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao. Vidura uvacha tasya shilanade sadhor brahmanyasya mahatmanaha ragya katamabhud dushta prajayad vimanayao. Vidura uvacha. Vidura said, tasya, of him, anga, shilanade, reservoir of good characteristics, sadho, saintly person, brahmanyasya, lover of Brahminical culture, mahatmanaha, great soul, ragyaha, of the king, katam, how, abut, it was, dushta, bad, praja, son, yat, by which, vimanaha, being indifferent, yayao, he left. Translation. Vidura inquired from the sage Maitreya, "My dear Brahman, King Anga was very gentle. He had high character and was a saintly personality and lover of Brahminical culture. How is it that such a great soul got a bad son like Vena, because of whom he became indifferent to his kingdom and left it?" Purport. In family life, a man is supposed to live happily with father, mother, wife, and children. But sometimes, under certain conditions, a father, mother, child, or wife becomes an enemy. It is said by Chanakya Pandit that a father is an enemy when he is too much in debt. A mother is an enemy if she marries for a second time. A wife is an enemy when she is very beautiful. And a son is an enemy when he is a foolish rascal. In this way, when a family member becomes an enemy, it is very difficult to live in family life or remain a householder. Generally, such situations occur in the material world. Therefore, according to Vedic culture, one has to take leave of his family members just after his 50th year so that the balance of his life may be completely devoted in search of Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Oh, I'm wrong. It's chapter 13. Sorry about that. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara disciplic succession. So we're proceeding now with some discussion of the sons of Dhruva. And I'm not going to go back and look at the whole family tree, but we have all the way up Dhruva, and he had one of his sons just immediately retired. He didn't want to be king. His eldest son was a very advanced devotee, so much so, if you recall, that he just pretended to be dumb, unable to speak, and deaf and blind, similar to Jada Bharat. Jada means stupid, dull. So Jada Bharat was anything but he pretended to be such because he didn't want to get entangled in the material world. The same thing with Dhruva's first son. And so we're hearing the descendants of his second son now, all the way down. And this story of Vena, or Vena, somehow, maybe this is where the word venal sin came in. I don't know. That's just a total speculation. But Vena was just bad. We're going to get more description here. I remember the thing that stuck out when I first read this many, many years ago. He would, he'd be playing with his playmates, and they'd go in the water or something. He would drown them. He would just murder his playmates and laugh. But because he was the king's son, they couldn't do anything. This was his character. Just the word incorrigible was invented for him. Unable to be, corrected. You can imagine the anxiety for Anga, his father, who, as we learn here, was very gentle, a good character, rabbinical. But somehow, because of the bloodline coming from the mother, there was a bad seed there. So, as described already in summary, and we'll get more detail, eventually Anga just got up and left. One in the middle of the night, he couldn't take it anymore, took sannyas, and they never heard of him anymore. So that created a problem, because without a king, all the dacoits and everything, come out and creates havoc in society. I remember I happened to be in Chicago when the big blackout occurred on the East Coast. Prabhupada was in the middle of it. You read the Lilamrita and you'll see blackout occurs. He just chanted Hare Krishna because he was used to it from India. You got it? And it happens all the time. He was surprised it happened in America. And it lasted throughout the entire night in New York City. And I think it was that one or the next one. There was another one that was smaller. Huge riots occurred, because suddenly the lights are out and you can go out and you break the windows and steal the TV and all like that. It was bad. Same thing happened in L.A. in '92. There were these riots and there was a breakdown in civil society. And suddenly the L.A. temple, I wasn't there. We had flown off. There was a meeting in Denver, and somehow on that very day, we're flying off and we're seeing the smoke rising from different areas of L.A. as the plane is taken off. And when we got to Denver, immediately Savas was with us and he turned on the TV, what's happening in L.A.? He said, oh, there's riots here, riots there. He called his wife. Yeah, they're coming down Watseka Avenue, and, what's going to happen? Anyway, devotees kind of marshaled themselves and they didn't harm the temple. But this is what happens in society when authority isn't there. There's a certain lid being kept on because of government and police and justice, But you take that off, it becomes damaged and havoc ensues. So that's what happened when Anga just got up and left. And so the Brahmins conferred, well, okay, we have to make his son the king, even though it could be problematic because he's not so good. So he became the king. But he himself was a dacoit, as Prabhupada describes. And he stopped all the sacrifices and tried to, So eventually, as described already in summary, the Brahmins don't like to do it, but in emergencies they will. They'll invoke their powers and chant some mantras, and they kill them. And then by churning his body in a special tantric way, and they evoked one person and another, and the second was Prithu. And that's really what it's all leading to, is the reign of Prithu and how he was the ideal king. He was a Shaktivesh avatar. Shaktivesh means especially empowered by the Lord. And the different Shaktis are specialized. Just like Narada Muni, he's Shaktivesh, Bhakti Shakti. He can make anyone a devotee, even a hunter in the forest. And we've already heard with Dhruva, Prahlad, and Vyasadeva is a disciple, so he has this Bhakti Shakti. And the Kumaras, who we'll also hear from, because they came to Prithu's assembly, he was such a great king, and they gave some instructions which are recorded here. They have the Jnana Shakti, the knowledge Shakti. And the others have, but Prithu has the Pala Shakti. Pala, we know from the word Gopal, means protector. So Pala is what the kings do. Is what the kings and the whole government does, of Kshatriyas, of pious Kshatriyas. They protect the people. Kshatriya literally means to protect from hurt, from harm. That's what Kshatriya means. So Vidura is puzzled. He's hearing from Maitreya. This whole third and fourth canto is Maitreya speaking to Vidura, and he praises Anga. So how did it happen that he had such a bad son? Now in this purport, Prabhupada quotes from Chanakya Pandit. Now, Srila Prabhupada learned these sayings of Chanakya, the Chanakya Shlok, when he was a child. This is a very nice way of imparting moral codes in the children, and they're not all, some of them are straight Vaishnava, but many of them are just moral codes. And so Prabhupada remembered this one about family life. So some of this may be a little bit surprising, but let's go through this. How is it? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm in 21 here. So one is supposed to live happily with father, mother, wife, and children. So right there, we see the fault here happening in the modern society. Family means this extended family. It's not just this nuclear family of a wife, and a husband, and two children. As the standard. And nowadays, even that's breaking down. There's so many, single mothers trying to raise kids, But family really means this extended family. And you can see why it makes sense. Because when you enter into family life and you have children, then you grow up, the children grow up, and gradually you grow older. And this whole idea of Social Security, that only came about because you had lonely old people who weren't being supported by their children. So the Social Security, where you get money at the end. The older, the elders are supposed to be supported by the youngsters, So the ideal here, you have the father, mother, wife. He says, but then there's also the cousins, the uncles. Sometimes you have a whole mishpucha, we used to call it in Yiddish. I don't know if anyone knows that word. That's a New York word. So, but that's that because of the progress of Kali Yuga, that's becoming lost, and now you have homeless people wandering, no support. It's horrible. So now, what does he say? The ideal is that the enemy. Now, the father is a debtor. I just heard Prabhupada speak on this in a lecture, and practically every day I'm getting, the purports are keying in with what I heard in the lecture. So, it's not true today. I don't think there's any law like that in America. But when the father dies and the son or the elder's son, they inherit the property. That's still going on. But you also inherit the debts. If the father's a big debtor and you discover, oh my God, here's the house, but he owes twice as much as the house, and now we have to pay off the debts. So then your father becomes an enemy, because he went into great debt. The mother, if she marries for a second time. So this, of course, is kind of puzzling in this the present day and age. But you can see how that can discombobulate a whole family. Here you have the kids who have their affection for the father and the father may die or go away. And the mother remarries. Now there's a whole other dynamic there. Now the stepfather doesn't have the same affection for the kids, you know, and the mother is now brought this stranger into the house, and it often causes a lot of problem. And you know, how many times do you hear how the stepfather abuses the children? You know, it's horrible. So that's an extreme example, but that's why he's an enemy. Now this one is kind of unusual. You say, well, what is that all about? That the wife is an enemy if she's very beautiful. Why? Well, I thought of two reasons. One is that, as Prabhupada mentions here, that you're supposed to become family life. Even the happiest family life is said to be a dark well in the philosophy of the Bhagavatam. In other words, you keep your eye on the prize. We, as spirit souls, we may come together temporarily in alliances, you know, or couples, whatever it is. But that's a very temporary arrangement. And the attachment that accrues from that, from the wife and the children and everything, is they're called knots in the heart. And they bind us to this world. Because after all, we're not the body, right? So this is just a temporary tabernacle, as it's called. And so we develop all these attachments in relation to the body. Then you leave the body, but the attachments go with you. And those attachments, you know, which of course is very traumatic, you're losing your loved ones or you're leaving your loved one, bring you back again to another body to try again and try again. And in the modern age, when nobody knows anything about rules and regulations, chances are very strong that in ordinary life you'll perform all kinds of vikarma, sinful activity, and you may very well lose your human life. So the attachment in the family is a temporary thing. Now, there's a way of doing it in the Krishna conscious way. There's something called the Grihastha ashram. When the household is actually an ashram, that means a place where spiritual life is cultivated. And you know, I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was an ideal. We have householders, you know, who do so much service, and they do it together, and they raise their children in Krishna conscious way. That's the whole idea. Then it becomes very auspicious, you know. And Prabhupada points out in one lecture, yeah, most of Lord Chaitanya's disciples and associates were all householders. It's not that, you know, it's just a brahmachari movement, although it may seem like in ISKCON in SanDiego, but it's not meant to be like that. So there's a way of doing the family life in a Krishna conscious way, fine. But it has to have a certain time limit, because there needs to be a point in which you kind of leave those attachments and cultivate your attachment to Krishna. And ideally, the way Prabhupada described it, man and woman get married by 25, and then they have the children right away, sons, hopefully. And then for 25 years, they, you know, do the family life thing. And then at age 50, the detachment is meant to be cultivated. Not immediately that the husband leaves, but there's a certain period called vanaprastha, which originally was they would go in the forest, I guess it's vanaprastha. But they start traveling around the holy places, and there's no physical contact, but there's still a certain amount of attachment there, and support. And after some time, the wife goes back home, and she's supported by the elder sons, who by that time are 25, 30, you know, like that, ideally. So that's the ideal, and you know, that's and the man then progresses towards sannyas and takes sannyas, and there's no contact, and it's like now Prabhupada more or less followed that, you know, practically. It was the timeline wasn't exactly there, but he had his household life, and he was working like anything. He had 5 children. How many sons? 3 sons, 2 daughters, something like that. And you know, he was working, traveling, and at the same time chanting. You know, he was just initiated and supporting the preaching of the Gaudiya Math, you know. And he tried like anything to engage his wife in the preaching mission, you know, but she wasn't into it. And I think we have to all thank her in a way, because Prabhupada would have stayed. He would have stayed in India. There's various things that got him out of India. The whole Jhansi thing, you know. Anyway, that's another story. But eventually it became untenable for him to stay because he wanted to preach like anything, and the family life was a blockage. So he took vanaprastha. He didn't take sannyas right away, he took vanaprastha. And I forget the time, it was 55, something like that. He was in his 50s, after 50 for sure. And then after a few years, he took sannyas. That also was, he got a lot of inspiration from within. He had dreams from his spiritual master. He thought, I can't take sannyas. And then his godbrothers really encouraged him because he was a preacher. He said the preaching will be so much more effective if you're a sannyasi. And it was. And, eventually Prabhupada came to America. So now the woman, if the wife is too beautiful, then that means that it's more difficult to leave the house. That's one aspect. I have to tell this story too. When Prabhupada got married, the wife was quite young. She was like 12 or something. There was no physical contact. This is a tradition, and we grow up. So then, he graduated. He didn't graduate from college. I was ready to graduate, but as a protest to the English, because they were ruling and they were teaching. He didn't take his degree. And he got work as more or less like a pharmacist. And eventually he started his own business of making medicines and selling them, and like that. So meanwhile, he's supporting his children one after another. But soon after he got married, I think before he had any children, he decided that he wanted to marry again, a second wife, which is completely bona fide at that time in India. You have a second wife. His father discouraged him, and he said, it's good that you don't like your wife so much, Please don't do this. And so he followed his father, it was kind of his spiritual guide at that point for sure. And he didn't marry again. And then Prabhupada, of course we heard this after he was a sannyasi and preaching in America. He said, this was a great blessing that my father gave me this. Because it was much easier to leave. It was easier to break the attachment, which is not easy, especially 5 children, you can imagine, So that the wife is very beautiful, it's very hard to leave. Plus, there may be some, if there's some problem in the family, in the relationship, then it's easier for her to attract somebody from the outside, which can cause havoc in the family, you understand? So that's what Chandaka Pandit is saying. But again, if there's strong Krishna consciousness in the family, then this thing about the wife being beautiful doesn't really apply. If you're strongly Krishna conscious, and that's pretty much what I have to say about that. So, and Prabhupada said, then the son who's foolish, or a child who's a rascal, and that's with Vena. It was so disturbing for Anga. He's the king. He has, wife. He has so much wealth, and he just said, "To heck with it." I've tried and tried and tried, and this son is just causing me more and more anxiety. I'm taking sannyas in the middle of the night. So it must have been pretty bad. And as we read more about Vena, we'll realize why he left. It was just untenable. So just a more general principle here, and that is the science of generating good progeny. It comes up right in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita in the first chapter. One of Arjuna's arguments for why he didn't want to fight was that if I kill or am responsible for many of the thousands and thousands of deaths here of these soldiers, then what will happen to their wives? They'll be widows and unprotected and can get polluted and so forth, and they'll be varna sankara. Varna sankara literally means mixing of castes, which is a means by which you will generate population that are confused in their varna and creates havoc in society. But in general, it means unwanted population, or population that causes great disturbance. And Arjuna was thinking, I'll be responsible for that. This was another reason why he didn't want to fight the war. He said, let him have the kingdom, and all these kids. So this is people don't understand this. I mean, where do you have anything like that? It'd be, people fall in love or whatever, or they just get together for casual sex, and children are born, sometimes out of wedlock. They don't get proper care, and so what happens is these kids grow up, they themselves become disturbances in society, criminals or drug addicts or whatever, and so. And then you find, okay, maybe they're not just street urchins or something, but even the people who come into responsible positions, they haven't been trained properly. Malignant narcissism, takes over. Sociopathy means that with no heart, you don't feel for anybody. These people sometimes get government positions and create havoc in society. And that's what Kali Yuga is all about, is that there's no control, and the people who are growing up, the population itself is so disturbing. And then you have this tragedy of the surplus population. I mean, it's like 60,000 homeless people roaming the streets of LA right now. They were shocked at the increase. And you've seen pictures. I don't know if you've been up there. I haven't been up there yet, since it's been like that. There's the encampments on the street, and oh my God, it's so disturbing. It didn't used to be like this even here. And people, these are people that are just falling through the cracks. Maybe sometimes not even apparently for any fault of their own, although karma's acting. And so somehow they have there's no support. The family, where's the family? They're scattered. They don't care, And the government is not doing anything, and they're just wandering around the streets. There was a lady here many years ago now, Leah, and this was her bailiwick, this little alley behind here, before you get to Hornblende, and she was an intelligent lady. I chant Hare Krishna. She wanted to know what that was. She took some books. I gave prasadam. She wasn't, she's trying to stay clean and everything. And I talked to her. She had been from Texas. And she had some schooling. I don't know if she had a degree or not, but she was college educated, And here she was, abandoned by her relatives somehow or other. She landed, and tragically, she ended up committing suicide. She just took a lot of Tylenol. You can die from that if you take enough. So, this is modern day. This is what happens when there's no understanding of the how to run society in such a way that there is the Vedic culture is pervading. The ideal, of course, is Rajram, is when Lord Ramchandra was in charge, But there's so many kings here. King Parikshit and King Prithu, we're going to read about Yudhishthir. And even the demigods are happy. When Yudhishthir was king, the rain came, not too much, not too little. I think it rained at night, so it wouldn't disturb for prosperity. The cows were so happy, they knew they weren't going to be slaughtered. They're overflowing with milk. They're moistening the pasture with their milk. They're so happy. And so many other things are happening. And yet now we think, it's, this is climate change, that's what's happening with all of these huge floods in the Mississippi area, all the way in the Midwest. They can't even plant. I mean, we're going to feel this, everyone will feel it. The prices of food will go up. This is the first thing that's going to happen. It's going to going up really seriously. And that people will become even more difficult to just live, And that so what is that from? That's the demigods, And these hurricanes and things. There's a huge hurricane threatening India right now, as we speak, and coming in. What's the name of the hurricane? Can anyone guess? Vayu. They've named the hurricane Vayu, which means air god. That's right. Vayu is pushing it. So, this is the result of a society which is saturated with sin. To put a summary word on it, and that's why the Bhagavatam was spoken. This whole movement is meant to bring about a revolution in the sinful life. There's Tad Bhagavasargo Janata Aga Viplavo. The words, especially Bhagavatam, this is Narada Muni preaching to Vyasadeva, inspiring him to write the Bhagavatam. First, he kind of says some heavy words about all the other things he wrote, which we say, this is the Vedas. he wrote the Mahabharata, which has the Bhagavad Gita in it, and all the other Upanishads and the Puranas. Some of these Upanishads are, have Krishna in them and everything. But he didn't wholly and solely glorify Krishna and devotional service. He mixed it in, bridge preaching. Oh, there's too much, they can't take it. So he would mix in some things. He'd lead the Mahabharata. I remember, some of you have heard this story, forgive me, that back in 1990, the BBT was going to produce a Mahabharata. Vidyanatha Maharaj had already translated the Adi Parva, and he was working on the Sabha Parva, which is quite dramatic. I can share it with you sometime. And the Adi Parva introduces so many things that then go on, the personalities, and it's a lot in the Adi Parva. Adi Parva means the first part. So I was working on that. I was one of the editors, so I'm going through. And, a lot of this stuff has really nothing to do with Krishna. And I remember I came across one chapter. There was something about the Nagas, which are a race of snakes, And I think they have their own loka right down. And here was like paragraph after paragraph of just the names of the leading snakes on Nagaloka. And I'm saying, do I really need to test the diacritics? Do I need to proofread this? What am I doing here? And later, and you read the first canto, and Prabhupada says, we don't really need to read the whole Mahabharata. It's not necessary, because the Mahabharata was written with all of these stories in it. Because in the present age, generally people are so disturbed, they like to hear stories. They're not going to hear the Vedanta Sutra, which is all philosophy. It's too much. And even some of these Upanishads. So he produced the Puranas, which also have stories in Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Purana, and all of the Puranas. And the Itihasas. Itihasas are the histories, chiefly Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Now don't get me wrong, there's wonderful things in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, including the Bhagavad Gita. But the whole point is that it's an emergency situation. We don't have so much bandwidth that we can, study all of these literatures, even the Mahabharata. And so Narada Muni is saying, Nayadvachas chitta badang hare yasho. All those chapters of the Mahabharata, he described the Nagas, he says, it may be written very nicely in Sanskrit, but it's like a pilgrimage for crows. He's referring to the other literature that he wrote. In other words, you shouldn't forget all that now, And so the very next instruction, he says, even though it may be the most nicely written Shakespearean poetry, those who are wise regard it as rejected garbage that they won't get. It's a place where crows go, which is rejected, filthy stuff. So what kind of literature should I write? So Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo. That creation of language, Vad Visargo, in other words, literature, that may be miscomposed in every shloka. That says, abadhavatipi. It's not bound up together. This is the words I use for Sanskrit. In other words, it's not like the very nicely written material poetry. But it contains glorification of the name, form, qualities, pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Then the wise, the munis, the yogi, they hear it, they chant it, they relish it, even though it may not be so perfectly composed. And what's the purpose of this literature? It's to bring about janataga viplavo. Aga means sin, and viplava means revolution. A revolution in the sinful lives of this misdirected civilization. So this is a we're trying to perform a seditious act here. Sedition means to undermine the way things are, the established government and everything. Not that we're trying to throw bombs or anything. We're not terrorists, but we're trying to undermine the basis of the sinful civilization, which is the sinful heart of the people. They become sinful because they're ignorant. They don't know anything, and so the whole Bhagavatam is an attempt. Now Prabhupada was very much inspired by that verse, Tad Bhagavasargo, because he's trying to present the Bhagavatam in English so that it can come out of India. Because if it's going to bring a revolution in the world civilization, and Lord Chaitanya's prediction was every town and village, then it has to be understood abroad. And his spiritual master told him, preach in English. English had become a world language. The British were all over the place. Even now, English is the basic language of the internet. Even if you're sitting in France, there'll be a lot of English there. So, Prabhupada took this verse and he was inspired. Okay, in spite of the fact I know my English is not perfect, I'm still going to work like anything to publish this. And like tremendous effort, all alone, he published 3 volumes of the whole first canto, in between 60 and 64, I think it was. And when he had those volumes printed, each volume he would use to raise money to print the next volume. He'd go out and he spoke to the president of India, where he appreciated his Bhagavatam. I think it's president of India, Lal Shastri or something like that. And so he was able to get some money, not enough money to go to America, just to print. Then he had to present those books to various people. He came to Sumati Maraji. She owned a freighter company, and she was a pious lady, a Vaishnavi. He was able to get free passage to America, no money, just the books, and his faith, and Krishna's, Lord Chaitanya's order, Bhaktisiddhanta's order. This is what sustained him, and the rest is history. So the point I'm making is that the Bhagavatam is very heavy words. This idea of the family life. Rishabdev, Pungsastuyamata Nibhavametam, and all the brahmacharis memorize this verse. Pungsastuyamata Nibhavametam Tayamato Vidya Grantamaho Atagvahat Cheta Sutapta Vitta Janasya Moha Yamaham Mameti. Pungsastuya, the sex attraction between man and woman, becomes so strong, and pungsa mituni bhavam, that's sex life. When they engage in sex life, then there's a knot that really gets tied in the heart. And if there's some civilization there, then you get married. Ata griha chet, then progressively you need a place, a house and a job or a field, a farm, cheta, and then the children come. Okay, that's natural. Apta, all the relatives, the big mishpocha. And then to support it all, vitta, you need money. So this is, and this increases what's called the false ego in the terms of I and my. I am the husband of this wife, I am the proprietor of this household, and so I. And they are all my relatives, my money, this and that. So that's the false ego becomes very hard. So the Bhagavatam, obviously there's so many stories of householders here, but there's always the element that it's for developing Krishna consciousness, raising Krishna conscious children, and ultimately that attachment has to be broken. If for the ultimate benefit of the soul, break out of the illusion of this body and go back home, back to God. So we're going to read about that now, and there's also the danger, as we see here, of a bad son coming up, and even just, I'll end with this, and that is that even just as Advaita Acharya, he's God, he's Mahavishnu, he had 6 sons, I think, and 3 of them were not devotees of Lord Chaitanya. And then he had, maybe he had 3, and one of them was, I forget, but he had some sons who were, not mentioned very much because they weren't devotees. Advaita Acharya. And then Prabhupada had 5 children, 3 sons. One of them got initiated, Vrindavan Das. He was with Prabhupada when he got on the boat. He was really supportive. But there was another one, I don't know his name, but after Prabhupada departed, he tried to sue ISKCON and get control of all of ISKCON, because Prabhupada had arranged for some stipend for his wife, and and he said, "Oh, this means he wasn't really a sannyasi." And so he was our father, and he created this big company called ISKCON, and there's all these properties all over the world, and see if we can get some. That was Prabhupada's own son, wasn't it? I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And it was defeated by Narayan Maharaj help to testify. No, Prabhupada was always a sannyasi. He was an ideal sannyasi. Because sannyas in India means civil death, means you don't have any responsibility anymore. Whatever you have, you're cutting off. And there's a legal aspect, but you have to be a genuine sannyasi. So Prabhupada was certified, and so that threat was good. But just to illustrate that there's no insurance in this age, as we see with Anga. And I mean, he didn't do anything, but it was just, fate that this son was incorrigible. And so household life can be auspicious. It can be a place where you could cultivate spiritual life, grihastha ashram, but there's also a danger there. It can be andakupa, means a blind well. It's hard to get out of. Okay, on that note, any questions, comments? We don't have too much time. I kind of went over. I read Dravida prabhu. Oh, Dharma
I have a question.
Yes,
just some clarification, because it's how to understand this, because at the beginning of the class when you're talking about Maharaj Anga just leaving and just talking about the social setup, it would seem that, well, if there's a big problem, men can just walk away from it. If there's a problem with the family or this and that, they have the option to just walk away from a problem. Say, I'm going to put on saffron and walk away.
Yeah.
There's one god brother, I forget his name, but he asked Prabhupada for sannyas, and Prabhupada said no. He said, you don't even know why you got married, you don't know why you were taking sannyas. So no. So in other words, just here's an out, an easy out.
Yes.
Is that actually being irresponsible, and what are the guidelines for something like that? Because someone hears this right off the bat, they go, well, men can just walk away. The wife's got to stay and this and that, and the kids got to deal with all the problems. And the guy just kind of says, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good point. This whole scene with Anga and Vena was kind of an extreme situation. I mean, you get the impression he tried.
His wife, he said, hey, I'm going out the window too.
I mean, when you read about Vena, you'll understand, But in general, no. The thing is that if you're, before entering into the household life, in a pious, virtuous environment like ISKCON is supposed to be, then it's making a commitment there, and that you're not. I mean, that became a problem in ISKCON. I think they made laws about that. I mean, ISKCON laws, because then what happens to the widow? She gets thrown onto the support of ISKCON itself. Because that's such sannyasi. It often means just goodbye. I'm out of here. Sannyasa is a whole other thing. So it's that's similar, because that's the age we live in. That's what so many marriages end up in. The wife is left holding the child, and that's almost a visceral thing. There's a built-in affection of the mother for the child, so the mother is not about to just leave the child on the curb, although that happens too sometimes. But that's no way to run a society. That creates havoc in society. So that is completely wrong. That's not a model here. I mean, Anga this is an exception. I mean, this is what the question is. That Vidura says, well, how could he do that? He had such high character, and how is it that such a great soul got a bad son? And I mean, it's implied. How could he have given birth to such a bad son that it would, he would pull his hair out and just leave? It's irresponsible, in general. But when you hear about what Vena was doing, you can kind of sympathize. So no, this is not the standard behavior. It's not meant to be a model. It's that there's a what is that famous verse for Shabdev? Guru nasatsat svajana nasatsat. You shouldn't become a father or a guru or a mother or a relative or even a deva unless you can deliver your dependents from birth and death. Now, I've often thought about that because, after all, each child grows up and they're all independent living entities. So I think what it means is that you are qualified to do that. You try as hard as you can to do that, and then you meet your responsibility. And then if there's still the devotee doesn't want to chant, or a child doesn't want to chant, the child may be 25 years old by then, says, hey, go in peace. I mean, you tried your best. But the point is you make the effort. You stay together. Certainly as a young child you don't abandon, having committed to this household. Then you have to see it through until the child is grown up and the wife is taken care of and everything. It's a big responsibility. So, and practically speaking, I mean, the point is, Prabhupada says, family means wife, mother, all its extended family. But when you have this nuclear family, even just the idea of taking vanaprastha and sannyasa, and there's no children involved. The children are already grown up. But what happens to the wife? they're not going to be supported by the elder children because that culture isn't there. They're living across the country or this or that. So the whole Vedic paradigm it's hard to superimpose it on what we have in Western culture. It's so degraded, really. Unless there's the extended family, it really doesn't work because there's no youngsters who feel responsible to support the oldsters. So then what happens? Well, Social Security. Well, that's a different ball of wax. Boom. Last one. Oh, I thought you were going to have a question.
But just a short, a very small comment. I don't know if Adrian turned, but you're saying about they just leave in, and like you mentioned, the sannyas ministry now for any man who's married and who wants to take sannyas, they actually have to get permission from their wife. It's like that now. So anyways, whatever. So the men, they can't get out so easy without the wife's permission. Anyways.
Hare Krishna. Do you want to one last word? It is getting late, so.
Just real quick, it was kind of similar to Dharmaseki Prabhu's comment, but you were mentioning, going through the different ashrams and then how Prabhupada didn't like his wife, and his father said that was kind of a good thing. Obviously Prabhupada's was on a different level and had this Uttama vision, and he did have, obviously, I'm sure you would agree that he had love for his wife. It was just he had a bigger mission, and Krishna had a bigger mission for him also. But what is the best way to understand some of these things? Because what Dharmaseki Prabhu was pointing out is that, this can kind of lead to members of ISKCON kind of misinterpreting or misunderstanding, and this can lead to neglect or irresponsibility. And, if the idea is to develop love for all beings and ultimately for Krishna, then this would seem to be a conflict if somebody's actually becoming neglectful or.
Well, the whole idea is it has to be done responsibly and under guidance. Because the tendency is to do things, if there's no guidance, well, what do I want to do? What do I consider the best thing to do? And that's often fraught with so many influences from the modes of nature and all kinds of things. So that's why I didn't know about this rule now, but that makes sense. That it creates havoc in society when there is irresponsibility. Taking responsibility is part of what it means to live in a civilized society. And the first responsibility begins with the family. Man for the wife, and the parents for the children. They're dependents. You brought them in to the world, or to your world, and now you have to see it through. But instilling that kind of sense of responsibility and duty is the responsibility of the leaders of society, which includes not just the government, but the teachers, your parents, and all this. That's why there's a culture, Vedic culture. And it includes the basic unit of society, which is the family. When the family unit is corrupted and is being degraded, the whole society suffers. That was Arjun's argument, and he was correct. But because Krishna had a higher plan, he was wrong in that instance. But that doesn't mean that basically he was right. If women aren't protected and there's children being born all over the place without proper protection, then what happens when they grow up? It creates havoc in society. And we've got generations of that now in society. So this is kind of a countervailing force, and we should be examples in every stage of life. And now we have to adjourn. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.